Hello and welcome to the Boss Battle Network. It's the second of our Spoilercast, so you may have just been listening to episode 6, during which James started a sort of spoiler-free conversation about Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. And as we said in that particular podcast, we are now going to do a spoiler-full podcast. So if you have not seen the film and you don't want to know key plot details, twists, etc., please stop listening now. But once you've seen the film, come back and have a listen. So with me is James.
Hello.
And Carl.
Hello.
And you may have noticed we've switched roles, and I'm Chris. So I'm testing out presenting skills very badly. So I'll start with an open question. So I'd stop talking for a minute. I'll start with you, James. What were your first impressions of the film?
I think as we covered in episode 6, I really liked it. Thoroughly enjoyed the film. It was nice to revisit the Harry Potter world. I think having had the it was 8 films, I think, was it? The Harry Potter? Yeah, 7 books, 8 films.
Yeah.
You know, that was a massive part of my 20s, which is scary. 20s. So it was nice to go back into that world. And it felt different enough that it wasn't treading over old ground, but it was still familiar. So I really liked it, and I thought there was lots of nice sort of subtle references back to, back to that universe we know, which is odd because it's a prequel. But yeah, I really liked it.
Same question to you then, Carl. As you came out the cinema, what were the first sort of words that came to your head really about the film?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. The effects, just the general screenplay as well. I thought it worked really well. I thought the guy who played it to begin with, Eddie, was it? Sorry,
Eddie Redmayne?
Yeah. I thought he played it really well. He's a very kooky guy, and I think the character needs to be kind of kooky.
Yeah.
Kind of an Englishman in
New
New York.
Yeah.
And I like the way he portrayed it. Obviously, being a magic, he's going to have to be being like a magic guy. He's going to be quite quirky. I think he's, from what was said about him in the film, with him being at a school and all the beasts being ostracised over in America and stuff, he's going to be quite quirky anyway. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Didn't see the twist. Oh no, I did see the twist at the end. I'd seen it probably about halfway through.
Okay, we'll come on to that actually. Yeah. So you predicted it. Interesting.
I didn't.
I didn't.
Did you not?
No, I had no idea. I mean, obviously, it's fairly clear as the film progresses that Colin Farrell's character, whose name escapes me, let me look at my IMDb.
Great.
It was quite clear from the get-go that he was going to... Well, I say quite clear, actually. I'm going to contradict myself. I don't think at the beginning it was obvious he was going to be a bad guy. He started to go more that way as the film went on. But at the beginning, I kind of felt like he might be one of these guys who's a good guy, but he's willing to do anything to make a difference.
When I say I guessed the twist, I guessed that he was going to be bad. I only guessed the very twist when he started walking towards them that he was going to be this Grindelwald guy.
Do you know the only thing that, we'll let you bring us on to that later on in more detail, but there was the only thing that did make me think was the hairstyle. And this sounds ridiculous,
right?
But there's a certain shot fairly early doors where you see the back of Grindelwald's head, and he's got exactly the same hairstyle, albeit a completely different hair colour to Colin Farrell's character. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, similar hairdos. And then I thought to myself, it would be funny, I wonder if that's Grindelwald, and then I thought, no, that would be stupid. And then completely forgot about it for the whole film. And then it wasn't until the end when it started to happen, I was like, the hairdos were the same. So
films like to do that, plan little things just to see whether you know.
I think on a second watch, it'd be interesting to see how much they seed that, and you just don't realise it.
Absolutely.
Well, I do like Colin Farrell as a bad guy. I think he plays a bit of a bad guy than he does a good guy.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I don't like him so much.
Exactly the same. I think as part of the person, he's a bit of a dickhead.
I don't know why, but I feel like I went in already feeling like I knew he was going to be a bad character. So I don't know whether that... I didn't really see too much by way of sort of publications on it prior to going in. But one thing I was convinced of that from snippets I had read, that he was a bad guy. I don't know whether something spoiled it for me or something, but I already expected him to be.
Fair, I kind of went into it as a completely blank canvas. Other than knowing Eddie Redmayne was this guy called Newt, and it was about a book that was in the Harry Potter franchise. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know any of the characters. I didn't even really know who was in it. I mean, Colin Farrell's on the posters,
Yeah.
but it didn't really click for me that what kind of role he might play, and I didn't question it. I wanted to go.
I think even from the posters, he has that kind of. He gives like the over the shoulder look, and he's thinking he looks a bit like an evil look.
He looks like an evil person anyway.
Yeah.
For me,
definitely in that
looks
because he had like the dark hair, and he was quite.
Well, look on this IMDb picture, which I know is not great for radio, but look, he even looks like a bad guy. And that's just him in a suit.
He kind of looks
does.
like Bond as well in a way.
It does a little bit actually.
I haven't really forgiven him for being part of True Detective season 2, which was a huge disappointment.
I haven't forgiven him for
I
Total Recall.
didn't even know there was a season 2.
Don't bother would be my advice, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah.
I'd only watched the season 1.
He did the Total Recall reboot, didn't he? And that was pretty forgettable.
Yeah.
I quite enjoyed that actually.
It wasn't
But
Total
again,
Recall,
he technically played the good guy there.
So coming on to another major part of the film, the location, which one of you, I think Carl, actually did allude to, the Englishman New York scenario.
Yeah.
So that's obviously a big fundamental difference with the Potter world we're used to. So what were your sort of how do you think that worked? Did it work well?
Well, I think it worked well because obviously it brought itself out of the Harry Potter world completely because it was just completely different. There were muggles, weren't muggles, there were non-mages or non-magics.
No mages.
No
No
mages.
mages, they call them.
No mages, yeah. So yeah, and I think it was obviously with Harry Potter, most of it is at Hogwarts, where this could have just been all the way over New York, effectively.
Well,
so I think the scale
towards
of
the
it
end,
was
it
good.
does sort of take over New York.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, James?
Yeah, I liked it. I didn't mind it was in New York. I liked the fact it was a period piece, so it wasn't like modern day New York.
Yeah, I
that
loved
would have
that.
been a bit jarring. So I've seen a lot of that. I like the fact that it was all sort of oldie worldy.
Yeah.
I liked, like you said, the language differences, the subtle things like muggles being no mages.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they had and I said this in the podcast, they've got the little twists on the laws. So it sounds to me, both around the beasts and the Americans' view on beasts versus the UK, and also on the whole Muggle situation, that the UK seems to be much more open-minded, almost like the 60s hippie versus the sort of straight-laced 50s person who's not really against the idea of marrying outside of it. So, the UK, he's coming from a world where it's perfectly acceptable to get with Muggles, where beasts are studied and looked into and stuff. It almost paints the UK, the Brits, as being quite sophisticated in there and forward-thinking, and the Americans as being, I guess what we kind of often think of the Americans as being a bit brash and a little bit, I guess, closed off to those ideas. And
Fairly topic. really.
Well, yeah.
He's just been elected, so...
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate, but I think I said in the podcast as well that it touched on quite a bit around political stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was.
Touching on there, but
It was
also
just after the
religion
war
stuff.
as well, effectively, wasn't it? Because there were
Yes,
sort of
yes.
people times.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and you got the religious stuff around the cult and the I guess what was the name of them now? The Salem something Salem. So the witch hunting cult basically. Which,
I quite like that strand.
Which is where that the cat. Now we're gonna have to look this up in Google because I cannot remember for the life of me what was the inner magical beast that people who suppress their powers was called. What was that thing called? What do they call it now? It wasn't like it's not a necromancer. That's something entirely different. I'll have to look at what that was called, but. I really enjoyed. I like that element, and obviously the fact that again this is a spoiler cast, so no surprises here. The fact that it turned out that the actual suppressed demon-like power was actually inside the that sort of witch hunting cult all along, which I really liked. But it cleverly took you away from who it actually was. They made you think it was the little girl.
Yeah, they did.
And actually, it was. I'm going to say his name was Credence.
Just Credence, yes, that's what his name was.
And obviously that lad who'd been helping Graves in terms of spying on the Salem witch group turned out to be the one with the powers. That was quite clever. I like that.
Yeah, it was really good. So, coming on to the main character, because he does sort of the films largely from his perspective, what did you think of Eddie Redmayne?
I thought it was really good. I think he made me feel quite awkward early on, but that was by design because he's supposed to be sort of socially inept and a little bit awkward with people. He's quite closed off, and he's his own man, and he does everything his own way. I like that, and I liked I liked how elusive he was at the beginning when he kept slipping people, and
that was good.
He was affecting a lot of people and didn't care, didn't he? Like he kind of ballsed up. What was his name? Kowalski, or his name was the his attempt to get a loan from the bank, he kind of scuppered that, didn't he? Got him in trouble.
Yeah.
Then he gets that Tina in trouble, who's the wizard agent.
Yeah.
And I like that. And then it starts to turn, doesn't it? You start to see inside his head and his world, and you see inside his case where all his beasts are, and he's almost got like a zoo in there, hasn't he?
It's really clever.
Really, really cool. And you start to fall in love with him in a way, don't you?
You're on his side, aren't you?
You want him to do well, and you kind of almost fall in love with the awkwardness. You go, okay, you're awkward and you made me feel uncomfortable, but now I'm kind of cool with it.
Yeah.
And I like that. Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of, when they're walking into these briefcase, it reminded me a lot of the sort of the later Harry Potter films when they had that tent.
Yeah.
And they walk into that tent, it's like this grand, massive tent in those really tiny. I like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Kind of feels a bit like the TARDIS. I still can't find what that thing was called.
So I don't forget to say this later on, and I'm sure you'll come to this as a talking point, but there was the only thing that I came out, and I think I said this to you guys as we came out the screening, the only thing that bothered me was when you realise that across the sea there's this huge faction of sort of professional wizards and an agency and protection services and all this sort of stuff. It makes you wonder why it is that at the end of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, it's just a bunch of kids taking on Voldemort. Where were these like overseas wizards and senior wizards when Voldemort was kicking off and making trouble in the last few films? It just made me feel a bit like,
true.
If you all exist, why didn't you get your ass over to Hogwarts and defend that school? Like, Hogwarts is famous enough to be known in New York. Why did no one care to defend it? Why did you leave it to the kids?
You wonder whether they'll try and do a Star Wars-esque thing, or how like at the end of Revenge of the Sith, effectively the not the Sith, what's what I'm looking for, Yoda and Jedi's kind of almost are in hiding. You wonder whether that happened, but in America or some sort of
and I guess we might find out. We've got 5 films to find that out.
It could just be a plot device, really, couldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It might go somewhere. That was the only thing I came at them and just thought, now that I know about this other world, where were you when Voldemort was ripping Hogwarts apart?
Although it could be if J.K. Rowling's really trying to sort of reflect history, and going on to your earlier point, maybe they're trying to look at the sort of WW2 scenario on a serious note, where it took Pearl Harbor being bombed for America to actually get directly involved. Yeah. And that was a world war. So
there was I might have to try and find this while we're talking now, but there was a tweet from J.K. Rowling in response to someone who felt they'd identified a plot hole in the film. Okay. And she made reference to the fact that it's planned and it's part of the story. Okay. I can't remember quite what it was. I'll try and find it. Yeah. While we're talking, but I'll have a look. I'll see if I can find it.
Well, we've mentioned the twist, so we may as well get it out in the open slightly. Yeah. What did you think of the twist itself, Carl, in terms of how it played out? Did it work?
If you want to explain what the twist was.
I was hoping someone else would, to be honest, because my memory's not good these days.
Well, the twist was that Graves was just the bad guy who was sort of mentioned throughout the film, Grindelwald. He obviously got into, I want to say the Ministry of Order, but it's not the Ministry of Order, is it? Basically the American ministry, I guess. Yeah. And he was trying to find... He looked like he was just trying to find powerful people to sort of get on his side, and he wanted to find this thing that we can't remember the name of, which you can't seem to find for love nor money on the internet. And he was using his powers to try and find it. And it was just revealed at the end that he was Grindelwald.
It was a little bit like the child he was trying to find was almost like... There's a bit... echoes for me of like Harry Potter being the chosen one, and everyone being sort of drawn to where is this chosen one. And I know he's more public, out in the open, Harry Potter himself, so slight difference there. But it felt a bit like that. It's like they want, again, kind of a little bit Star Warsy. It's like the Emperor seeing Vader's power before he turns him dark and thinking, well, I'd rather have him on my side. Yeah. I'll twist him round for my own gain, sort of thing.
Well, his whole basis, he wanted the war to carry on, didn't he? Yeah. Because he wanted to eradicate Muggles.
That's right. He wanted to engineer that.
I think it was just.
I think he was trying to start a war, wasn't he? Because he wanted to. Because the basic principle is that the wizards aren't known about, isn't it? They're in hiding.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he wanted to. He wanted to reveal the wizards for what they were, so that they could take their rightful place instead of hiding from
them. Like X-Men, actually, think about it.
A little bit like Blade in a way.
Yeah.
But the vampires, why we got to hide ourselves from the humans when we're more powerful, food, effectively.
Yeah.
So that's what he was.
I found there the article, let me read it to you. So, J.K. Rowling has responded to a fan suggestion of a plot hole in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. A fan recently pointed out on Twitter that there appears to be an inconsistency in the plot, as Newt Scamander is allowed to keep his wand and use magic, despite having been expelled from Hogwarts for endangering human life with a beast. Hagrid was famously not allowed to do so in Harry Potter books and films. Responding to the suggestion on Twitter, Rowling seemed to deny that there's a plot hole, replying, "All will become clear, trust me."
To be honest, at the risk of spoiling it, I think I can guess, because they alluded to the fact that Dumbledore was such an ally of his and spoke up for him at the school. Well, I think it must have something to do with Dumbledore's kind of allowed that to happen.
Well, we saw a few things, didn't we, in the film that called back to the original. So Dumbledore, you mentioned, we didn't see him, but we heard about him. And he was described as being a teacher at Hogwarts rather than a headmaster.
Yeah.
So he's not rose to those ranks yet, but he seems to be, doing his usual trick of favouring and being a little bit rebellious against the rules. We also saw very briefly, and I remember this moment vividly because the rest of the audience around us, all the obvious Harry Potter fans, started whispering. It was when they put the necklace on, I think it was on Credence, or someone was given the Deathly Hallows symbol on a necklace.
Yeah.
He was told to touch it to communicate with him, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So that was quite cool because we've already seen that presumably some reference to their stories we heard about the Deathly Hallows is going to come into it.
Yeah.
Because that's now been referenced, so that would be quite interesting. And it got a lot of people talking. I'm trying to think what other things we heard which linked back to the original.
There was Beatrix Lestrange, wasn't there? Who was
Linda Lestrange.
Yeah, but
which is a form of flame, but we don't know what went on there. So
and possibly end up being the grandmother of Bellatrix.
Yeah, mother, for all we know, couldn't it?
Or mother, depending on the times. I suppose
depends where they go with it, doesn't it?
Around the 20s, 30s, isn't it? So it's probably 70s.
That was the character that thing he played, wasn't it?
Bellatrix Lestrange, you're thinking of rather than Beatrice.
Yeah, Helen Bonham
Bellatrix Lestrange is Helen Bonham Carter.
She was really good in that. She was such a horrible...
But then the Linda Lestrange image we saw at least seems to be a very sort of pretty, almost sort of angelic lady.
But will Grindelwald maybe have turned her bad or something,
who knows,
involved because went off the rails, could be something there, couldn't there?
Yeah.
So I think so for me, one of the things that was interesting and it makes sense and it works, it's validated for me by how good the continuity was, is that they kept the transition in terms of it was the same director, David Yates, as the last 3 Harry Potter films, so both Deathly Hallows and
he's doing all 5 of these now.
Is he going to do all 5? There we go.
Confirmed to do all 5.
So I thought that worked really well, and obviously, and it's the first time J.K. Rowling has scripted, but that's because, as you mentioned in a private conversation earlier, there isn't she hasn't written a book already, and then it's just someone else takes over and writes a script from it. So I thought that worked really well. And kept the.
In fact, if you look at IMDb, the very, very short plot synopsis says the adventures of writer Newt Scamander in New York's secret community of witches and wizards 70 years before Harry Potter reads his book in school. And that book, which is just about the beasts and stuff, and probably some of his journeys, I guess a little bit like The Hobbit maybe, but that particular book is referenced at the end of the film, isn't it?
Yeah.
So he strikes up a relationship with the equally awkward agent called Tina.
Yes.
And who he gets into lots of trouble, and she's been in trouble in the past for sort of trying to seek out and support Credence, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In the end? I mean, she was trying to protect him from the lady who ran that Witches Society. But they strike up quite a nice little, almost like a romance, don't they, by the end? They don't ever do anything about it, but there's a suggested feeling there that
one of the things I liked about it is that they didn't do the classic thing of they embrace and all that in the film.
And I like the fact that he's offered to hand deliver her a copy of his book when he's written it. So obviously, sort of linking back to the story there, we know. But it'd be interesting to see. I think the next film I'm sure I've read is based in Paris.
Oh really?
I'm sure I've read that. I might have made that up. I'm sure the next one is based in Paris.
It'd be nice to see other.
Didn't they have? Because remember they had was it when they did the Triwizard Tournament, or what's the one with
the Goblet of Fire.
Goblet of Fire.
The visitors, didn't they? From
so they had the visitors.
Schools.
One of them a French school. Maybe.
The girls.
One of them was
Russians, but I'm
sure.
Yeah,
the Russians.
Bulgarian, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sure one of them was French.
Because there's a lot of Eastern
they could link
European
into that.
places referenced with dragons are concerned, aren't they? If you remember back to when I think it's the
Weasley's
Weasley's brother
Romania,
goes to
aren't
Romania.
they? Yeah.
And I think I don't know if it's Romania that Hagrid gets that big bird thing from.
Might be.
I don't know. There's lots of references. It'd be interesting to see what they do because I assume Will we see Tina in the next film because they're not doing it in New York? Will she travel to Paris for some reason?
It's surprising
Maybe
if
she
they didn't,
will.
having built that.
Find out, I guess.
Or will they make us wait till he goes back to New York with his book?
Of course,
or
I
something?
think probably make us wait. I mean, they've got 5 films to film, haven't they?
But because
Got
there's
4.
her and her sister, Queenie, were both sort of quite central characters in this, you'd almost have to sideline 2 of the main 4 protagonists in this film.
3
to agree.
out of the 4.
Well, yeah.
Because you sideline
Yeah.
what's his name now?
Yeah.
I can't say even if I can read it. Kowalski.
Yeah.
That Dan Fogler played him. I thought he was really good.
He was
I only-
excellent,
I can only
yeah.
remember him being in, I want to say Balls of Fury, but it's the table tennis, ping pong.
Oh, yeah, it's Balls of
Take off
Fury.
of Dragon, of the
Yeah.
Dragon fight, Bruce Lee and all that.
Yeah.
Was he in that? Was he?
He's in that. He's the main character in that.
Oh, right, I can't
But
remember.
he has more hair and it's a bit scruffier. But
Yeah.
that's the only thing I really remember him from.
Yeah, it's very good.
But he was brilliant in that film, and I really liked his character, and I was quite pleased with how they left the ending.
And me. Like
Tell you
that.
one thing that did surprise me. So at the end of the film, obviously, Newt gives him that case full of silver dragon eggs or
Yeah.
creature eggs, whatever they're called.
It's for the bank.
And those weird sort of snake dragon things. And he uses that to get his bank loan to make his bakery.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's not supposed to remember anything because they've wiped his memory.
Yeah.
But then, if you remember, I was surprised that's where they went with that, because I thought the obvious thing to do in terms of giving him money to do his bank thing was that he'd find that hole in the wall
Yeah.
in his apartment that little creature had been stuffing with gold.
Oh, I forgot about him.
Because when they rebuilt the house, he was still sat in a hole
Yeah.
filling it with gold. So I thought, if he gets the creature from somewhere else or whatever, and gets him back in the case, would he sort of find in his wall this hole full of gold, and then use that to start his bakery?
That
So I was
would
quite
make more sense,
surprised
wouldn't it?
that the silver eggs were used, because it never really made
Yeah.
any reference back to that hole full of gold. So I was quite surprised by that, but still nice ending, and I like the fact that Queenie went in and he remembered her, and she could tell because she read his mind, and that was quite cool.
Yeah.
I like the fact that all the cakes that he was making as well were kind of little flashbacks to what
all
he'd
the
been
creatures
through.
went
Which
in.
makes
It's almost
think-
like he'd been dreaming it, I think.
This is that how they played it? Because I was trying
Well,
to
it
work out
doesn't
whether
say,
I was trying to
but I
work
think
out
so.
whether they hadn't wiped his brain, but he had that unconscious knowledge that don't acknowledge that happened, like to anyone else, because he knows the dangers of that. I don't know.
I thought maybe
that'll
that
be
when-
revealed next film.
When he stepped out into the rain and made him wipe his mind, I thought maybe the kiss from the woman who could read minds might have made him remember it through that sort of way, but that's just
It'll be interesting. I almost don't feel like I need to see those 3 characters in the next film.
No, I
I'd
think
quite like for him to go back to New York and see them in another, like in a later
Yeah.
film,
yeah.
just to see what they're doing now.
Where are they,
I don't want the whole film to be based around those, and I doubt it will, but I don't think all 4 will be in it. Tina might be. I could see if Tina's got back into the magical music
been
thing, that she might get
Transfer
shipped
to
over.
the
and-
French bureau.
Yeah,
There
I
might
could
have
see
a bit
that
of a
happening.
cameo if he does go back into New York, but not centre around.
Yeah,
sort of
I
thing.
mean, Queenie was I think will be a popular character. She was good.
Yeah.
She played a good role. She was very funny, and I
Yeah.
think when she's first introduced, it was really clever.
Yeah.
Because you feel about as awkward watching it as he does being
Yeah.
in the room. I thought that was quite clever. It made you a little bit like, you're in your underwear. This is odd.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Especially for a
talking to
Harry
me.
Potter film.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's a lot. I mean, there was quite a lot of violence in there. There's some quite. I mean, some of the
it's
deaths and
12
stuff were
days,
quite
isn't it?
gruesome, as well as the religious stuff, the political stuff, the semi-naked. I mean, it wasn't that bad, was it? Her, wasn't
No,
it? She was in
but
racy underwear, particularly. but
Yeah,
it was sort of
For the time.
relevant to the time period.
Yeah.
But
12A is quite fine, isn't it? Because if you think I always think as a child particularly, the last Horcrux side, the snake, the bit in the part 1 where the snake just suddenly comes out from nowhere and it's masquerading as that old woman that takes him back. That, for a young child, that's got to be really scary.
when you go back and watch the original Harry Potter, how sort of fun and fluffy that was, and how
Yeah.
dark it gets by the
But I
end.
think that's still a 12A, isn't it? Because it's still just a PG.
Yeah, 12A,
remember
that
that song
definitely
saying
has
you
much,
rating.
Yeah.
I
the
think
very
the
original
ratings
one,
are just
wasn't it?
cartoons now, aren't
Yeah.
they? Really? Like your stories and stuff. But anyway, I have found the name of
Yes.
the Black Mist thing. It's called the Obscurus, and
Obscurus.
someone who is the host of it
How
is called
ironic.
Obscurial.
And so, for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, well, I don't know why you'd be listening to this if you haven't. That's the trapped and frustrated, embodiment of the powers of that suppressed wizard, isn't it?
Yeah, because obviously it alluded to it. Obviously, because of the war, people were suppressing their magic so they wouldn't get. He's effectively like burning witches at a stake, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So you've got to try and hide it.
It's
and that
interesting
would create
because
an obscure.
obviously Credence was too old to have it
Yeah.
by sort of previous standards,
That's
which is
why
why
it
he
was
was
so
so powerful.
powerful,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was quite clever.
It was.
And I thought the visuals on that were impressive as well. I mean, they're getting a bit samey now for I think all big scale CGI stuff now is getting a little bit samey, but there was no point at which in this film I thought really out of the experience with that. It doesn't gel. Even, and I know we were going to talk about it, the giant, weird, bloated-headed rhino thing.
Yeah.
And that really weird sort of sexual dance that he performs for him. Yeah. It's just, when you think about the things we've just covered, death, politics, religion, or, and then you go, weird, sexy rhino dance. That's actually quite an odd.
It just adds more to the quirkiness of that character as well.
Yeah, you're kind of flicking from
work, didn't it?
That scene though to a serious scene and back, them trying to contain that. I mean, I think it was really funny. The whole chase for those animals, and particularly that one was good because even Kowalski was in trouble there, wasn't he? Which was quite funny.
I thought considering the running time as well, it's over 2 hours.
Was
I
it?
didn't think it dragged at all.
No, I didn't think it
was
2 hours.
Which achievement in this day and age.
Just think about that scene. Can you imagine having been there when they filmed that? Because obviously we saw it in a park with the big creature and he's dancing around. Imagine that's in a green screen environment. There is no rhino with the bloated, sweaty head thing, and he's just there making these weird grunting noises and performing strange manoeuvres on the floor. I think as a cameraman or any part of that setup, I'd have been pissing myself.
Oh yeah.
At how stupid he looked doing that.
On a completely separate tangent, did you know that Eddie Redmayne back in the day when he was much younger actually auditioned for Harry Potter but didn't get very far? I don't know if it was for the role Harry Potter, but auditioned for a role.
I have a feeling I remember reading that after the films. I didn't read anything prior to the film, but I did read a few things afterwards just to see what people's views were and to understand some of the things that maybe didn't click.
Yeah, it sort of sounded like he'd got to, like if you're thinking these sort of reality shows on music, it sounded like he'd got to maybe see the producers, but before seeing filmed type thing. Yeah. Random fact for you. But what do you think? So where do you think it will go next, other than Paris? So you don't think it's going to focus on? It's going to mostly be on Eddie Redmayne again and Grindelwald.
I think you've got to have Newt. I think he's going to be a key part because ultimately this is his experience to write his book, which is what becomes the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, isn't it? So I think it's probably going to be. It's got to be a central figure. I'd have thought. I genuinely have no idea where they're going to go with the story.
And I like that. It could be.
I like that.
It could be effectively 2 stories in one. You could have him. It could just be following him a bit more, maybe trying to find some more beasts, goes to another country and whatnot. And you've also got back in America, Grindelwald being in prison or magic prison. Him maybe breaking out and introducing another character in America who's going to try and stop him.
I seem to remember that. I might have made this up in my head, but didn't he make some sort of reference about them not being able to contain him or hold him?
Yeah, he did say something, because as he was escorting him away, he did look at Newt, didn't he? And say something to him, but can't remember what it was.
Yeah, I'd be really interested where they go with it. I mean, but that's what I liked about the Harry Potter films, is that I, unlike a lot of people, and I think we all agreed early on that we've never read the books. Which, we might be missing out, I'm sure we are.
Yeah.
But I think it's a bit like Game of Thrones. I wouldn't want to know what was supposed to happen or could happen or is going to happen and then go and watch the film. I much prefer going into the film and getting an entirely original story and knowing nothing. And it's one of the few chances you get to do that these days, because normally most modern films now are either ruined so heavily through all the trailers, which this wasn't really. There wasn't a lot on this really.
No, there wasn't.
Considering, I don't know how it's done in the box office. I think it's done alright, but it wasn't overly advertised, certainly on the channels that I watch. But it's nice to not know everything about it. And with the Marvel films, I have a horrible tendency to see an article and have to look at it, and then end up knowing half the film before I get into it. And I'd rather not. And because it's a completely original story, I don't know the characters. I'm not invested in them. I'm completely open to where they take it. If they killed him in the next one, it wouldn't bother me.
Yeah.
They won't. But if they did, it wouldn't bother me. I'd be cool with that as long as the story continues to be good.
It's interesting, obviously, because all of us around this table at the moment have obviously read. This is going completely off a tangent. Probably really shouldn't say it, but reading the books before seeing the film, as opposed to reading, watching the film and then maybe reading the book. But Ready Player One.
Yeah.
Because I read World War Z.
Yeah.
Years before the film actually came out, and it was completely different, and it kind of ruined the film in a certain way.
So I
just have to see
it as a huge opinion on that film. I've never read the books, but
I have to see it as look. Just not part of the film. It's just got the same name as the book.
Yeah.
I'm not a big reader, so the only experience I've got of having read a book and then saw the film was The Hunger Games, and the book was streets better than the film. Mainly because and as much as I like Jennifer Lawrence, couldn't give a flying about her character in that, because she just didn't interest me in the slightest.
Sounds really interesting because I didn't read the book and I liked it, but the general consensus of readers is they toned it down too much.
In the book, you really feel for her because she really is put upon, and there's a lot of emotion in it, and she goes through a hell of a struggle. Peter, he goes through a massive struggle. We've gone right off tangent here.
Yes.
The little girl who
You're listening to the Spoilercast for each fantastic
Hunger
Games.
There's a bit where the little girl gets killed in the Hunger Games first film, and it's fairly innocuous, really. I think it's like a stray arrow or something like that, or a spear. I'm pretty sure, and I'll have to go back and reread it. I thought she got stoned to death in the main book, and it's quite gruesome. And of course, because she's hurt no one, and she's been picked on by these psycho boys. That was me. That she. He
did a Donald.
That I think it just fell a bit flat. Like, she didn't really die in any particularly gruesome circumstances. Jennifer Lawrence's character hadn't really got attached to her. It was just a bit flat. Yeah. So that's my only example. And the only thing I've tried to do, the only time I've ever read a book after the film was Jurassic Park: The Lost World.
Yeah.
Don't ask me why. Years and years and years and years and years.
So
and years
funny.
and years
I'm the opposite. My first experience of reading a book and then seeing the film was that.
I read about the first chapter.
Yeah.
And they introduced Julianne Moore's character, whose name escapes me from the actual film. And they introduced her as having short, dark hair.
Yeah.
And in the book, she's got long red hair. And I was like, nah. I was done with it. It's a stupid thing, but at that point, I couldn't imagine it because in my head, Julianne Moore is that character. So when they start describing her as looking different, I'm like, what?
Yeah. Do you know, if you've done it the other way around, it's a brilliant book, actually.
I'm sure it is. My mum read it and she loved it. But
and the best part, the one thing I'll pay still a compliment here, the most gripping bit of the novel was the scene with the T-Rexes in the trailer, so they captured that perfectly.
My mum read the book and said that scene, she said that scene was better in the book still. In her opinion, she thought there was more detail. Because little things like they explain how the cars worked and what vehicles they got rid of, they just kind of come out of the blue in the film. Yeah. We've gone right off it. Chris,
I'm going to run with it and go with it. I'll be interesting for either you two to read World War Z then, because the massive problem.
Seen the film.
Oh, have you not?
No, I heard it's a bit disappointing.
It's just another zombie film, effectively.
Yeah.
But the problem that people had with the book, as opposed to the film, was the book was they were just the slow walking zombies. In the film, they were like the super fast running speed zombies, and that was just the. Yeah.
Chris gets back on track.
So, what I was going to say, well, I think we've discussed it quite at length. One thing in terms of going forward that interests me is thinking about the fact that it's 70 years before Harry's in school and you've got 4 more films. I think it'd be really interesting if they spaced it out almost, not in exactly equal parts, but to get it as close as possible. So by the time you come into the 5th film, it's very much linking it to Voldemort and all that. I love the idea of that. I think that'd be really interesting.
I do as well.
I don't want it to get too close. I wouldn't mind it getting
maybe
to
Voldemort as a child.
I'd be happy. I'd be happy with going as far as Voldemort killing Harry Potter's parents.
Yes, and me.
Yeah,
that's where I want to start.
Because that would round it quite nicely into the films.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Although would that feel a little bit like when the 3 new Star Wars film literally ended with Darth Vader being created, and then it was like, I don't know. I'd like that though. I think that'd be good because I think I can't imagine for a minute they're not going to create Voldemort. They've got to have Voldemort.
Surely, yeah.
I'm sure Grindelwald will have something to do with that. I don't know. I could do going back over the films now and working out what Grindelwald is all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And where he comes into the films because his name's definitely mentioned.
But how interesting would it be to see Tom?
Christmas is coming up, ITV2. They'll have all Harry Potter.
I've got them on DVD.
I
think. Didn't he have a vault? Didn't Grindelwald have a vault? Am I making that up? I can't remember.
I think you might be right.
I don't know. I'll have to check it.
I have to go back and check. But so let's do, because I love the star rating.
Oh,
let's do a star rating on the film. So Carl, you can go
first.
first.
We did that in the episode.
Yeah, we did that in the episode.
I think you said 3.5.
Oh,
we had to give you a half star measure, didn't we?
Okay, yeah, we did.
So we do it again for the benefit of people who haven't bothered.
It's just a
nice.
It's just a nice summary. I'm so in that world of total film, then you have a star rating. Exactly, yeah. So Carl, just to reiterate, what was your star rating?
3.5 stars.
3.5 stars.
4, I said.
4. The more we've talked about it, the more I think it should be 4, but I did say 3.5 earlier, so I should really stick to that.
So now you'll stick to your score, but when it's about downgrading poor old Doctor Strange, it's perfectly fine to change
I will stick to the
shocking.
Yeah. I've got to try and stick to my...
Can't wait to watch Doctor Strange again.
Yeah,
just so go off on another tangent.
So I think that's probably an appropriate time to finish, isn't it? Where I'm going to struggle now is the means of getting in touch via
Okay.
all modern versions. So I'll
put
pass
this
that
up
to
so
James.
Next time you host, you can get this right. So you can email us at bossbattlenetwork@gmail.com. You can get us on Twitter at bossbattlenet. We're also on Twitch and YouTube. You can just search for Boss Battle Network and you'll find us there. And we have lots of episodes you can go back and listen to. I say lots, there's 6 standard episodes and another spoilercast, which you can go and catch on iTunes if you're interested. Or
Just in time for Christmas.
Or you
Just in time for Christmas.
And free.
Or buy on Amazon the best bits of Boss Battle.
The blooper reel's 3 hours long.
We could have all the episodes transcribed and sell a book.
We could.
Episodes 1 to 6, the transcripts, and you could read
How many
our
people
rubbish
buy that
rambling. No one would buy it, obviously.
I'd buy it.
You buy it. 3, we'd buy it. 6, we'd buy it for our partners. 5.
So on that note, all it remains from me is to say thank you for listening and good night.
It's a good night from me.
I'm just going to say bye, because I still think good night sounds silly.
You don't like fist pumps. You only like handshakes. You're very traditional.
I don't like handshakes.
No.
Just don't like touching, really. Anyway, good night.
On that bombshell, good night.